When I first got to college, I thought the hardest part would be the coursework. I was wrong. I went to a private university in Chicago on a partial scholarship, the kind that barely covers your first semester's books. My parents were proud but broke, and I was too proud to tell them that pride doesn't buy groceries. My name is Marcus. And by the time I was 19, I was already faking a version of my life I couldn't afford to live. I worked nights as a barback at an upscale lounge on the north side, velvet booths, jazz music, men who wore watches that cost more than my tuition. It was the kind of place where everything looked expensive and everyone acted like they weren't pretending. That's where I met Leo. He looked like a man from a luxury cologne commercial. Salt and pepper beard, clean hands, crisp navy suit that made him look like power itself. He sat alone, sipping scotch, and he watched me. Not the creepy kind of watching, the kind that makes you feel seen, studied. He asked me my name one night, then asked what I studied. I told him architecture. He said he used to want to be an architect, too, before life pulled him in other directions. He asked if I wanted to grab a drink after work. I said no. Then I said maybe. Then, the third time he asked, I said yes. We met at a different bar. He bought my drink. Then another. Then he gave me an envelope. I hadn't asked for anything, hadn't even hinted. But somehow, he just knew. Inside was enough money to cover my next month's rent. Just to talk, he said. You don't owe me anything. I believed him. That was my first mistake. The second time, he invited me to a hotel. We talked, then we didn't. And when it was over, he handed me another envelope. This one fatter than the last. Only if you want, he said. I took it. At first, it was just Leo. Every 2 weeks, then every week. He liked to pretend we were something. Liked to imagine we were lovers, sneaking away from a world that didn't understand. He'd unbutton my shirt, like he was unwrapping a gift he didn't think he deserved. And for a while, I liked being wanted. I liked being needed, but money has a way of making you forget where your lines are. One night, a guy from my graphic design class, Ely, slid a card into my backpack. I found it later. It had a name, a number, no explanation. When I asked him what it was, he just said, he's safe and generous and into guys like you, guys like me. I wasn't sure what that meant then. But I called. And that's when it started. That semester, I had 4 regulars. All men in their 40s and 50s. All married. All quiet about what they were buying. I told myself it was just a hustle. A transaction. I could keep my heart out of it. My body became a place I visited for money and then left behind after every hotel checkout. Some just wanted sex. Others wanted something else. Someone to tell them they were still attractive. Still alive. Some cried. Some couldn't finish. Some just held me like I was a memory they never got to make. I got good at reading rooms, at knowing when to speak and when to disappear into silence. I wore 2 faces, one for school, one for behind closed doors. I convinced myself I was in control, but control is an illusion. I learned that when I met Carl. It was a referral, one of Leo's business acquaintances. I expected the usual, a hotel one, an envelope on the nightstand. But Cal didn't ask for any of that. He offered me tea, asked if I'd eaten. He wore reading glasses and had a slow, careful way of speaking, like every word had to pass a test before it left his mouth. He sat across from me and asked about my drawings. I didn't even remember telling him I drew. Then he said something I wasn't ready for. Do you remember what you wanted before all of this? I laughed. But it wasn't funny. It was hollow. Because the truth was, I didn't remember. I'd gotten so good at playing the role that I forgot who was underneath the costume. Cal didn't touch me that night. He just sat with me. Like that was enough. When I left, I felt lighter, like I'd been seen, not rented. The next time I saw him, he gave me a book on postmodern design and said, think you'd like this. And then he paid me. Even though we never did anything. I should have stopped then. I should have walked away. But I didn't. Because something about him felt safe. Too safe. And when you're used to surviving in shadows, safety can feel like a threat. So I kept seeing him, and started pulling away from the others. Leo noticed first. Then Marcus, another client, pulled my wrist too hard and said I was getting too emotional for a professional. I remember sitting on my bed that night, holding both phones in my hand. One ringing from a number I didn't save, the other buzzing from Cal. I answered neither. The next morning, I threw the second phone into the trash behind the library. I didn't know what I was walking toward, but I knew what I was done running from. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because when you finally try to get clean, the dirt doesn't just wash away. It fights back. And as I'd learn soon, not every man in a suit lets go without a price. The next few weeks were quiet. I went to class. I studied. I even started sketching again. For the first time in a long time, I remembered what it felt like to move through the world without a price tag on my skin. But guilt is funny. It doesn't come all at once. It leaks into your life slowly, like a faucet you forgot to tighten. I'd be halfway through a drawing and suddenly remember a hand on my chest that didn't belong there. Or the way Leo used to say my name like it was a transaction, and I'd wonder if Carl thought about me. Or if I was just one of his moments of charity. He hadn't called since the night I walked away. But then, on a Tuesday, I found a book waiting on my dorm doorstep. Brutalism and the Architecture of Vulnerability. Inside was a sticky note. Thought you'd enjoy this. If you ever want to talk, see. I didn't respond right away. I told myself it was better to stay clean, to stay distant. But I carried that book with me everywhere, like it was some kind of emotional lifeline. It reminded me that someone once saw me as more than a body. Someone saw the artist, the dreamer, the kid who just wanted to build something that would outlast him. 2 nights later, I called. "Hey," I said. He answered like he'd been expecting me. We met at a small cafe near the lakefront, the kind of place with chipped mugs and staff who let you sit for hours without ordering more. Cal was already there, reading the newspaper like he was from another era. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile that says, "I missed your body." It was the kind that says, "I missed your presence." We talked about nothing, then everything, then nothing again. I told him about school. He told me about the time he wanted to leave law and start a vineyard in Napa. We laughed at the absurdity of it all. And then he said something that caught me off guard. "You're not done with them, are you?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure. Part of me still needed the money. Another part needed the power, the thrill of being wanted, desired, worshipped. But another part, when I kept locked away, just wanted to be held without conditions. Cal saw it. All of it. "I'm not here to save you, Marcus," he said. "I just want you to know there's something on the other side of all this." What if I'm not built for that? You are. You've just been living someone else's architecture. That night, I didn't go home. We didn't sleep together, not in the way people usually mean. We lay on his couch, shoulder to shoulder, talking about nothing. About the sky, about childhood, about what happens when you lose yourself and forget the sound of your own name. In the early morning, he whispered something. "I like you better in this light." What light? The one where you're not selling anything. For the first time, I felt exposed in a way that wasn't about being naked. It was worse, more honest, and terrifying. But that morning came with consequences. 3 missed calls from Leo. A voicemail from Marcus saying, "Don't forget where your rent comes from." And a text from a number I didn't recognize that just said, "You're not special. We all paid." I deleted them, but I felt them, like fingerprints still pressed into my skin. That weekend, I ran into Ellie at a party. He pulled me aside, grinning like we shared a secret. "Heard you've gone soft," he said, sipping his drink. "Falling for the clients now." I didn't answer. But something in me broke open. Not because of what he said, but because he wasn't wrong. I was falling. Falling for a man who saw me as more than an exchange. Who didn't ask what I cost, but instead What I dreamed of? Who touched me with his eyes more than his hands? But I also knew that Cal had his own shadows. You don't get to his age, his calm, his kindness, without hiding a few things behind your smile. And I was beginning to wonder if maybe I wasn't the only one in this story who wore a mask. The next time we met, I asked him, "Why me?" He stirred his tea, quiet for a moment, then said, "Because I used to be you." Different details. Same act. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. That sentence stayed with me for weeks. I started sketching again. Not for class, but for me. Drawings of crumbling towers, of bridges half built, of hands trying to touch through glass. But life, as always, has a way of testing you the moment you start to feel safe. Because one night, as I left Call's place, a black SUV was waiting near the curb. Leo stepped out. He wasn't smiling. "Get in," he said. And suddenly, I wasn't 19-year-old Marcus with dreams in his sketchbook. I was back in the passenger seat of a life I thought I'd escaped. The passenger door slammed behind me before I could even sit properly. Leo didn't say a word for a while. Just drove, fast, clean turns, tinted windows. That same silence he used the first night we met. He knew how to use quiet like a knife. Finally, he spoke. "So this is where we are now. You ghost me for some silver-haired professor with a savior complex." I didn't answer.